So today I want to finally tackle a subject I've been truly looking forward to for quite some time. The topic is Destiny 2, and my focus will be a before and after analysis of the game since the split between Bungie and Activision Blizzard. To be extremely clear right off the bat here, this is not a review of content quality, this is an analysis of business practices and game health. Truthfully, I'm not qualified to discuss relative expansion quality in terms of raw gameplay, that is, because I've played very little since a couple of months post-release of the initial Destiny 2 game. As a result, this video will not be focused on what I think of the game's latest expansion or the quality of the recent updates. It will remain focused on the direction Bungie has taken in the aftermath of the recent split. To begin, I want to take everyone back in time, all the way back to before the original Destiny game had even been finished. Bungie, a highly revered studio that once brought the community critically acclaimed Halo games, had since decided to pursue a spiritual successor to the Halo series after their split with Microsoft, with a new MMO-esque take on the format. To get this done, they turned to a publisher. In this case, the publisher was Activision Blizzard. As a result of a relatively unrelated lawsuit, the publishing contract between Bungie and Activision was made public. It's long, it's dense, and it's uninteresting for the most part, but one paragraph sticks out substantially. Paragraph 1A pertains to the release plan for Destiny as a franchise, and contained within it are some very important specifics. Here is what the paragraph reads. The release plan for the Destiny game's release plan is currently comprised of four major retail Destiny game releases, tentatively scheduled for the fall of 2013, 2015, 2017, and 2019, and four Comet releases following each Destiny game release, tentatively scheduled for the fall of 2014, 2016, 2018, and 2020. In addition, as part of the Destiny game's licensor shall also produce DLC releases as mutually agreed by the parties at the time periods between retail Destiny games and Comet releases. The expected business model for the products is a blend of retail packaged goods sales, although the parties acknowledge and agree that the future retail model for iterations of the Destiny games may be via digital download rather than disc packaged goods, subscriptions, downloadable content, value-added services, and microtransactions, the exact mix of which shall be determined by mutual agreement of licensor and Activision. Pricing strategy for the products shall be subject to mutual approval, provided in the event of a deadlock, Activision shall have the tie-breaking vote. Activision will have control and final approval over all decisions relating to retail sales and promotions, discounts, rebates, etc., provided that Activision shall meaningfully consult with licensor on such decisions in advance. To summarize the most meaningful takeaways here, Destiny was scheduled for 4 different games, which, if it were to have remained consistent, would mean that in a matter of months, Destiny 4 would be releasing. And on top of that, all monetization and retail decisions relating to the sale, price, and marketing of the game, were made by Activision Blizzard. Also, in the event of a deadlock, Activision Blizzard could break the tie, which effectively means if Activision said, "This is what we are going to do," and Bungie said, "No, we aren't going to do that," Activision could simply override them and do whatever it wanted. This is the foundation for what evolved into Destiny and Destiny 2. Generally speaking, when examining community sentiment, the trajectory of both Destiny releases so far has started extremely low and built up over time. After a series of DLC updates, the game expands to a point where community goodwill shifts to generally positive. This is mostly based on what I've been told about the game by a decent number of hardcore players and fans, since I myself did not play all that much of the original Destiny, though I did play some and only played a portion of Destiny 2. For the original game, the expansion that really pushed it over the edge and seemed to garner widespread community good faith was the Taken King DLC, and for the sequel, the Forsaken seemed to have a similar effect. The problem is, with each subsequent DLC, the game, by and large, became more expensive to get into. Since we know that Activision Blizzard had the final say, and with hindsight, now that the split has occurred, solidifying this assumption, but more on that later on, we can reasonably conclude that Activision Blizzard was the driving force behind expansions being specifically designed so that they required all previous DLC purchases to function. The effect of this practice means that even with price drops on the base game and discount bundles with previous DLC packages grouped together, getting into Destiny well and truly after launch, when multiple expansions had been released, was a costly endeavor. Now, this part is speculation, but that is where I believe the 4-game model comes into play. With a new base game every couple of years, and a hard reset on expansion DLC because of that base game, it offered players a new entry point, and allowed Activision an angle to effectively, in a way, double or triple dip dip back into the pockets of their audience. Additionally, if we examine the contract again, we can see the timeline for the Comet expansions is 1 year after initial release, and seems to bridge the gap between base game installments. If we align that with some of the most successful DLC releases, such as The Taken King and The Forsaken, we can see that they fit exactly into that timeline, each releasing almost precisely 1 year after their corresponding base game. So it is reasonable to assume that the games were released in very poor condition owing to rushed development and inadequate resources, to then be somewhat fixed a year later with the Comet expansion, only to be made obsolete soon after with the next full release. This is all by design and was the brainchild of Activision Blizzard. Now, for the sake of time, I won't go into the Eververse, the season passes, and the myriad of other additional ways that the Destiny community was monetized, partly because some of it does indeed fall to Bungie as well, but mostly because even brushing past those secondary tactics, it still becomes very clear just how monumental the shift away from Activision Blizzard has been. Now it's time to jump forward to the actual split. The reason this moment matters is because Bungie retained full publishing rights to the Destiny IP. The split also came well in advance of the contract expiration, and though I am unclear as to the exact catalyst for the divorce, it appears to have been building up for quite some time. For starters, Activision had expressed dissatisfaction with the Forsaken expansion sales, while Bungie's Luke Smith had fired back with an adamant statement that Bungie was pleased with the expansion. It's not anything incendiary, but smaller context clues like this were out there, and it seemed that Bungie had a clear focus on building up Destiny 2 over time to what it believed it could and should be, while Activision Blizzard, as is, has been, and always will be true, was focused on nothing but bottom line profit increases. Regardless of the exact specifics, the time came and Bungie made a clean split from Activision as the news spread like wildfire across all social media. By and large, this announcement was met with applause and happiness. The widespread belief seemed to revolve around the idea that Activision Blizzard had been holding Bungie back and that the game would now thrive, something that I myself mostly agreed with. There is one important thing to note here. The Eververse, with its bright engrams and various microtransactions, was something that had been widely attributed to Activision Blizzard, but in the aftermath of the split, the Eververse remains intact, perhaps even more active. So while the parting of ways between Activision Blizzard and Bungie has yielded many fruits, the Eververse appears to be here to stay, and will also take on a lot of responsibility when it comes to funding further development. In the immediate aftermath of the split, it was unclear exactly what would change, but jump forward again to June 2019, and we can finally see where the road has led. The first change revolved around distribution platform. Instead of Battle.net, Activision's wholly owned proprietary storefront used to download and launch their products, the game would be coming to Steam, a much more popular and well-rounded PC gaming launcher. This change would never and could never have been possible while Activision Blizzard was in control. First and foremost, Steam takes a hefty percentage of sales revenue, starting at 30% and decreasing based on volume. With Activision so focused on incremental profit improvement, rather than seeing any reduction whatsoever at any point in time, switching from Battle.net to Steam was not even a thought to be entertained, but it goes still further than that. The second major change was that the Destiny 2 base game and all subsequent DLC except for the latest entries would now be free. This alone will constitute a massive influx of players. I could do an entire video on why the free-to-play model in gaming has begun to tip the scales and turn towards mainstream, but regardless, instead of a money-gouging entry point every 2 years or so, under a contractual obligation with Activision Blizzard, Bungie had now set the game to have a consistent level of entry that made the base experience accessible to anyone at any time, and regardless of when they dive in, there would only be a marginal paywall in place for the latest expansion or two, before they could really experience the entirety of what the game has to offer. The third and possibly most impressive but least appreciated change is cross-save. Cross-save is a definitively pro-consumer ability. Some gamers may have Xbox or PS4 or PC, it doesn't really matter, and that platform access can shift. Where once a player had a gaming PC, perhaps something breaks and they now only play on console. With cross-save, instead of being forced to buy a new game copy, buy all of the expansions again, each requiring the previous installation to operate, players can simply port their save data and use their own characters regardless of which platform they are on. This convenience ability would never have been possible beneath the yoke of Activision Blizzard, for the same reason that Rockstar and Take-Two wait so long to release Red Dead Redemption 2 on PC, and also lack cross-save themselves. There might be more to that story there, I'm mostly speculating here, but that's really what it feels like. They are trying to spur gamers to buy multiple copies on different platforms. It's a common phenomenon that has many different indicators. Sometimes major releases come out a few weeks earlier on console, and then move to PC. This is often deliberate, because the launch day hype will cause more hardcore hardcore players to purchase the game on console and then move to PC later when it finally releases there. It's a double dipping tactic, and under Activision, Destiny 2 fell prey to it. But now, with Bungie at the helm, the game has abandoned those tactics. The original Destiny game took years to build up from a rough launch to a point where the community accepted it as a deserving experience. Immediately after that point was reached, the rug was ripped out from under them, and Destiny 2, a complete regression on everything the original had built, was shoved out the door under contractual obligation. The sequel, again, slowly built up its content, and now that this monumental split has occurred, it has become clear that Bungie is focusing on evolving Destiny 2 over time and upgrading the experience rather than adhering to the cramped contract framework from their original deal with Activision. Going free to play and simultaneously shifting to Steam will see an explosion in the player base. Cross-save will make the game more accessible for a larger group of players on a more consistent basis, and all of it combined has seen Destiny shift from what appeared to be a struggling, time-locked franchise to something that actually has a very bright future. The concern of cut content is often voiced within the Destiny community. There is a trail of breadcrumbs that indicate cut content from Mars in the original Destiny game was used in the making of Destiny 2 and its paid DLC. These concerns are well documented and hard to ignore. For the sake of time, I won't compress them into this video itself, but rest assured there are plenty of Reddit threads and YouTube videos skillfully extrapolating where and when cut content was repurposed, but regardless, moving on from that, the concern of cut content is yet another area that has somewhat been alleviated. The primary reason to cut and repurpose existing material is to meet deadlines or to scrape profits. Bungie is now free from the former with their pressing contractual alternating 4-game timeline, complete with Comet expansions, having been removed from the equation entirely, and additionally, they've established through their latest business decisions that the latter is not of immediate concern to them, at least not with such looming priority as to spur them to cut corners and execute shady anti-consumer practices. All in all, the transition that has taken place before and after Activision Blizzard has been staggering, and I would even go so far as to say that it has set an industry precedent that could be used as an example for many titles in the future. That's it for today, though. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. We have memberships, merchandise, that sort of thing. We also do have a Spanish version of the channel, which I will link in the description down below for anyone that prefers that, and we hope to have more videos coming out on both of the channels in the near future. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.